So that's the part of Michael that I know best. And I think it's a different Michael, as I said, than many of you may know. I said earlier I was going to talk about Michael's death, and if you'll bear with me a little bit longer, this has to do with his relationship with my mother. In 1973, Michael was about 26, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and she stayed with my wife and I for several months. Our oldest son at that time was about a year old. He clearly wasn't talking, but if you'd say book, he might say book or something like that. And my mother's favorite grandmother, she told me, she called Bubby. And when Jerry and I asked my mother how she'd like to be called, she anglicized it or something and said she wanted our son to call her Baba. So Baba she was. At that period of time, like Linus from the Peanuts cartoon, our son Kobe had a security blanket too, only his was a cloth diaper. They actually did use cloth diapers in those days. And the ones they have nowadays are much better, but so he would walk around like this, 3 fingers sometimes. And that was his favorite calming thing in the world. In the New Year, after New Year's, into New Year's 1974, my mother went back to Florida. She was clearly dying then. I need to back up a couple of months. While she was living with us, she became ill and went to a local hospital in Massachusetts. And she had a DNR because the anticipation was she too would have a rather long, prolonged, painful death. While she was at the hospital, her heart stopped and she died. And they somehow didn't notice the DNR and they brought her back. That was in October of 1973. As I said, in New Year's into 1974, she went back to stay with Sylvie and Ben. And later that winter, in February, Sylvia called and said she clearly wasn't doing well, and I flew down to Florida, the plan being for me to take my mother back to be with Jerry and I for whatever remaining time she had. One night when I was down there, I was due to come back with my mother the next day. Jerry was giving our oldest son a bath, not uncommon, but unusual for that time was that he wanted to take the diaper into the bathtub with him. And Jerry said, well, it's going to get wet, but he wanted it in there, so, so what? So take a diaper into the bathtub with him. So she put him in the bathtub, the diaper went into the bathtub with him, and it got wet. At which point Kobe became hysterical, clutching the diaper, saying, my booby, my booby, my booby, my booby. Jerry takes him out of the bathtub, wraps him in the towel. Telephone rings, and it's me calling from Florida saying, my mother just died. We put a diaper in my mother's coffin with her. Flash forward quite a few years. Kobe grows up. Kobe gets married. His first son is born on October 19th. October 19th was the date my mother first died. A little while passes, Kobe has a second son. That second son is born February 27th, which is the day she died for real, and of course, the day that Michael died as well. My belief is that, my understanding is really that my mother thought that relationships didn't necessarily end when one died. The person died, but not the relationship. So my thought is that my mother came for him, and she wanted to, in death, as she did in life, to help him make whatever difficult transitions he had to make, and to make things easier, to ease his pain, and to provide him with, for his last time on earth, some kind of state of calm and of peace.
Thank you, Scott. what Scott is saying is very true, is that everyone in this room knew a very different Michael, the one that I met 30 years ago in Boston. And, you know, I'm going to, talk about that in greater detail, but the fact is that Michael was a person who grew and changed through his entire life, and it is amazing to see the transitions he went through. As Scott mentioned, one of his earliest accomplishments was his ability to sing, and he did a lot of performing in clubs and singing in front of bands and the like. And by the time I met him, he had stopped singing, but I did get the chance to see him perform 3 times. Once at a wedding and twice at charity benefits. And I have to say, even though he was out of practice and not working anymore in the field, that he had a remarkable voice, and he was certainly someone who knew how to use music and his voice to entertain people. And as you all know, who just talked with him, he could still hold people's attention and be entertaining, even just in conversation. Andre and Joe Andre wrote another piece which he gave to us for our wedding gift, which he titled Arnold and Michael, which he said is a reflection on the way he felt Michael's and my relationship was. And it was a gift to us at our wedding, and now he's going to play it for all of us to hear and enjoy.
And before we start, I'll just say a couple of words. Last time I did this at another memorial, I turned it into Blubberfest 2003, so I'll try not to do that today. I met Michael, I guess, 1997, 98. My girlfriend at the time insisted that we meet, and she thought we would have a lot in common, and she was right. The first thing that struck me when I went over to meet Michael and Arnold was the fact that they were surrounded by technology. And at the time I was quite heavily addicted to the internet myself. And I saw Michael with all these monitors around him. He was in this easy chair, and he had a whole room, a big TV. And I thought, man, this is the way to live. And I was really impressed. And I went home thinking, okay, now how can I do this myself? If I can just shut myself in my room and live like this, it's going to be fantastic. But I was dissuaded from this because, of course, I have to make a living. But that began a friendship based on our mutual love of technology, our fascination with the future, and then I found out Michael knew a lot about American popular music, that he was a singer, and he turned me on to some very choice Judy Garland, which I didn't know about it, and I had I knew who she was, but I wasn't as aware as I should have been about her greatness. And then I turned him on to some stuff that maybe he was, maybe it was a little bit of pure jazz that he wasn't aware of, so I think he appreciated that too. And over time, we became very good friends. And what really impressed me most, I'll try to cut to the chase here, what really impressed me most was how courageous he was. How, even though he was suffering and things were not going well most of the time, he very rarely complained, and he was always interested in what people had to say, always loving, and always motivated. I don't know how he stayed motivated through all the sickness that he had, but he hung in there like as long as he possibly could, and that was very, very motivating for me, very inspirational. Because in my own history, my mother was sick for a long time, so I sort of watched her go through that period too. And I honestly didn't know whether I was going to be able to hang in with Michael, because I didn't know if I could go through it again. But I am glad I did, and I'm glad I spent as much time with him and Arnold as I did. The one last thing I would like to say is that I think it would be really great if all of us could try to lobby in our way with the friends we know, the people who are connected with the medical state here in Quebec, if we could try and get things to improve in the health system, because if anybody really suffered because of the deteriorating health care, it was Michael. And although he had some good doctors who were friends, Irv and Tina, there were a number of heartless bastards, I mean doctors who were Jewish, who made things difficult because they weren't around as much as they should have been. They didn't take care of business. And it was frustrating for everybody who had to go and visit him and see that. And I think it needs to be said here today. And I hope that all of us can pay tribute to Michael by trying to change that system, because it needs to be changed. It needs to be fixed. And we can only do that if we keep it in mind. That's the way we can really honor Michael's journey. Okay, so here's Arnold and Michael. Thank you. Here's Arnold and Michael. This is based on a George Gershwin song called The Man I Love. It's a little bit of a pun there. And I hope you enjoy this. We decided we should end this on an up note. The other one was kind of a downer. This is hopefully more optimistic. Doesn't matter. Yeah, I'll take it.